Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Apologies, we were a little late. We were having some technical difficulties, but we worked through it. Today, I have Dr. Sharon Grossman, and we're going to talk about stress. So, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And speaking of stress, I mean,
Those
right?
moments where you're like, I once had I was doing a presentation at a conference, and it was, sometimes you use your own laptop. And of course, I plug my laptop in, and the wheel of death starts spinning of updates. And I literally had to borrow someone's laptop because
it wouldn't work.
it wasn't updated quick enough. And like, my presentation starts. Anyway,
This happens all
not
the
what
time,
we
I'm
were.
sure, to everybody. So I'm sure people can relate.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Civility Partners is a company focused on building positive and thriving work environments. And so we love to talk about all sorts of things related to that. And so just to introduce you, Sharon, your website is, let me see, I had it here somewhere. Where is it? DrSharonGrossman.com. And you are an international keynote speaker, and you teach organizations how to keep employees happier working for them rather than their competition, which is obviously super important to keep talent. And you like to empower audiences with practical tools and research and emotional intelligence. And just like me, you partnered with Fortune 500, small businesses, and everything in between. So thank you for being here.
Thanks so much again for having me. I'm excited to get into the weeds with you.
Let's do it. So there's this concept of stress advantage, and it has an impact on employee retention. So let's start there.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so one of the things that I noticed, and you probably could relate to this, is that when we think about the word stress, it has a very negative connotation, right? We often think about, oh my God, I'm so stressed, as a bad thing, something that you want to run away from or avoid. And what we don't know is that there's a whole other side to that coin. The fact is that we need a little bit of stress, and stress is something that is helpful to us in a lot of ways. It's actually the thing that gets us from maybe just not wanting to get up in the morning to getting to work on time. But also, when you amp it up a little bit beyond that, beyond the basics, we get to this optimal zone of performance where we're more focused. You might notice how if you've got a deadline, you just become sharper. It's that stress kind of coming on. Now, when we have too much of it, performance starts to decline. So you got to think of it as a bell curve, where if you have too little, it's not motivating you enough to really get out there and perform at your best. If you've got too much, you're breaking down because you can't function anymore. It's somewhere right in the middle of that bell curve where we reach optimal performance. And I believe that if we can find a way to manage our stress where we get it to that optimal zone, we know how to make sure that it doesn't become too much, then it can really serve us. It can become our advantage.
So how do we know, how do I know when I'm in a good state of stress versus a bad state? Are there signs I could be looking for?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Well, so for sure you want to be able to understand that. And then I also want to talk about just our mindset around it. So we all know what it feels like to be
burnt out, overly stressed,
overwhelmed, anxious, right?
Yeah.
That's where you're on the negative side of that bell curve. You know that it's too much for you. So there are people that do, and by the way, everybody's got a different threshold, so you have to know what works for you. But there are people who say, I thrive under deadlines, and they get things done really quickly. And it's like, if I have too much time, then I procrastinate, I don't get anything done. And, but I need that pressure cooker kind of experience. And other people are like, no, I need to have enough time to get through it. If I have too little time to get it done, right? There's a deadline pending. That's when I start to feel too stressed out. And when I have too much stress, then the performance actually goes down because now it's like, I'm just in fight or flight mode.
Mm-hmm.
right? I can't really focus. I can't do my best work. So it's going to be different for different people, but everybody knows what it feels like when it's too much. And so remembering what it's like for you. Now, stress manifests also differently for different people. So for some people, it's like racing heart, or maybe it's a hard time falling asleep because you can't turn your mind off. You got so much going on, right? It might be that you're so overwhelmed, you can't make simple decisions. And for other people, it's very physical. Like you're starting to notice physiological changes in your body. Maybe you break out in like a rash, or, you're having different effects on your appetite or what have you. So it's very, very different. There's not like a one size fits all for people in terms of how it manifests, but you have to kind of think back to times when stress was prevalent in your life and maybe it was too much, and remember what that was like. So that's kind of like your signpost. That's when this is what I need to look for. And when you find it, that's where you start to figure out how to get back to that optimal zone. How can I recover from that so it doesn't get even worse, right? Then it doesn't become chronic and then turn into burnout.
I'm trying to remember a time when I was in optimal stress, because these days I'm constantly in too much stress, and I think I'm probably not the only one. So yes. I think as you're talking, I'm thinking about public speaking. I love being in front of a room. It's stressful. But it's good stress. It helps me, stay on top of my game and all of that. And so that's really enjoyable stress for me versus the ongoing stress of life, running a business, going through a divorce, dealing with a retaining wall in my backyard, like blah, 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 blah. So for those of us who are kind of always in burnout, I'm too stressed mode, how do we, I don't know. I mean, other than public speaking, I'm kind of like, I don't know that I can really locate another experience or remember other times where I'm like, this is super fun stress.
Well, I mean, I get that there are certain things that you'd like to do more than others. And, it's funny because, like I said, it's different for everyone. So public speaking for other people would be like,
I know, it's like a death wish.
Right? But you and I are like speakers, so we like to get up on stages and do our thing. But yeah, I mean, I think even in your day to day, instead of thinking about it as like a whole, if you broke it down into specific tasks or projects, I bet that there are certain things that when you do it, you get into the zone and you're like really into it and you're focused and time just flies by. Do you have experiences like that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm not giving myself enough credit. I love working on proposals for clients because that's my jam, to strategize and help figure out what are all the ways we can help this person. So yeah, I guess there is some of that at my desk of like, this
or like if you're doing your show.
For my show. Yes.
Talking to people. Like there's certain things that I bet you really love to do. And there is a little bit of stress with all of these, right? So for instance, perfect example, we had some tech issues that was probably a little stressful, a little bit of stress, right? Because you're like, I want to get on time. I want to make sure this works. So even in the things that we enjoy doing, there's always a little bit of stress. Like you might be, speaking in front of an audience and maybe you forget what you're supposed to say next, right? Or all of a sudden the tech doesn't work, your slides don't work, something's going on, or you can't get the audience to participate when you ask a question. So all of these things can create stress, even in the things that we enjoy doing, but to get really good at managing your stress, that's the key, right? Because here's the thing. When I said I want to talk about the mindset, it's really about what are your beliefs about stress that matter a lot in how you manage. Because if you believe that stress is bad, and as soon as you feel stressed, you're freaking out, you're only going to make it worse.
Right.
But if you believe that, if you understand this concept that it's on a spectrum and an optimal zone, and you need to just bring yourself back from this, this overwhelmed city to like that optimal place, then you can start to delve into problem solving. Like, what can I do to scale it back? Maybe I just need a timeout, do some deep breathing. Maybe I need to, stop checking emails like every 5 minutes and just focus on getting my work done so that, I don't have it looming over my head. Whatever it is for you, you have to start asking yourself better questions in order to get to the place where you want to be. And I think something that's very helpful too is if you could assign a number to your stress, because that really helps you pin it down. So if we're saying that optimal zone is, let's say, between, I don't know, 4 and a 6, right? And everything above that, like a 7, 8, 9, 10 is too much. Then where are you right now? Are you at a 7 or are you at a 10? Because that's going to require different kinds of coping strategies. If you're at a 10, you're going to need a lot more time to recover. If you're at a 7, you're like, what can I do to scale it back? Maybe even just to 6, because that's going to be enough for me to like get my work done. Right?
That's a really great piece of advice. I really like that. We have a couple questions. I'm going to say something first, and then we'll definitely get to them. I feel like you're also talking about being resilient. I'd love to, dive into that I would assume resilience and your ability to manage stress gonna go hand in hand. I know resilience, one of the qualities of resilient people is what you said, being able to kind of like, okay, I'm in a hole. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and little by little you can climb out of it essentially. So what are your thoughts on, is stress, managing stress and being resilient? Are there surveys out there on that where researchers have been able to tie those two things together?
Well, we talked about how stress is good for you. And if you think about it, how do you build resilience? It's through your experience with adversity, right? So if I've been through something really hard and I've made it to the other side, then the next time something happens, I can rely back on that experience and say, you know what? I got through this before. I can do it again. That's a mindset that comes from experience. And that's why we say, like, stress isn't the enemy. Like, stress is something that can actually make you stronger. And it comes back to, how do you think about it? And the more you believe that you are resilient and that you can get through it, the more you're going to get out of stress mode and more into problem solving mode to be able to get to whatever solution you need that will get you through the day. And I think a lot of it has to do with your trust in yourself. And I know a lot of times people don't have that relationship with themselves. They're not thinking about, everything that they can do to get them through. They're not thinking back to past experiences and like, what did I learn from that? And what did I do? What helped me last time? And how can I build this toolkit of, coping strategies? They're not thinking like that. But I think that's an important thing to do. So I think a great thing to do right now is, if you're not stressed, think back to those previous times and start to create maybe that list of things that you could do in the future when
you're stressed. So
that you can access it readily.
Yeah. We've got some great questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them. AJ is always full of really provocative questions. I'm going to post this one because this one's, are there cultural or societal factors that influence how individuals perceive and respond to stress? It's a great question.
That is a great question. And certainly culture and society absolutely shapes our perception. And I think that what we might say is that, for instance, in the West, we are all about individualism, whereas in the East, it's all about the group, the team, the family. And so in terms of coping, if you think about it, one of the things that we probably underutilize most in the West is others around us. There's so much shame in being vulnerable and for asking for help. Whereas I think, like, if you have that Eastern mentality, you are more likely to not only rely on other people and accept that help from them, but not really have any sort of stigma around it, and not always even need to ask so much for help, because you're just in this team that is so gelled, that is so like everybody just constantly checking in with each other, that it's just like a natural part of the process almost,
Yeah. I'm going to add to that too. I think a lot of countries, downtime and vacation and all of that is much more acceptable than the West. And I mean, I almost sometimes feel guilty if I'm not stressed. I'm just so, I'm like always like got so many things going on. It takes a real like, Catherine, get out of your head, enjoy the pool, and just, just be okay with being silent and not running around doing something. So maybe that's some of my personality too, of like the type A, got to get going, got to do stuff.
Yeah, I actually gave that a name. I call it the frenzy fallacy.
Ah,
This idea that we have to be busy all the time, and that is what's going to get us to be productive. And the truth of the matter is we're spending so much time doing things that don't move the needle that we wonder, hey, how come I put in all these hours and I still got so much work left? It's like, well, because we're spending all this time on unproductive meetings, on checking emails, on being on Facebook, or just doing things that really waste our time. So we have to be more strategic about how we spend our time. And I think the goal is, can you have shorter work days that are more focused so you could do deep work and then have more work-life balance because you're working less?
Right. I mean, that's what they figured out in, other parts of the country, that whether you have 32 hours or 40 hours, you're going to do the same amount of work. It just, we've got some good comments. Rhonda says, this is great. Much needed information. Harry says, I'm Buddhist and I find that chanting helps. So that's another great tip. I wanted to circle back to something you said earlier around, employee retention, or I think I had asked you about that, retention and keeping employees feeling like they're thriving, which is always our goal. And, we at Civility Partners have developed a survey for it's a climate assessment, and it's looking at employee engagement, job satisfaction, feelings of inclusivity, and some other constructs. And what's happened through all the years we've been doing this, employee engagement has come to be defined here as feeling inspired, and excited. Self-efficacy, which is the, feeling appropriately challenged. And I think that really ties into what you're saying, where, we all have our boring tasks. We all have our stressful moments where we're really out of our comfort zone. But if as managers, we can kind of regularly be in tune with employees being appropriately challenged, where they're being pushed a little bit and feeling maybe some of that good stress, but they're going to come out on the other side being like, okay, now I've learned, I'm even better. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, you mentioned a few of the keywords that I talked about in my burnout book. And what I actually found is that doing this research, there are a number of things that are important in order for us to have a good experience at work. And by good, I mean that, yes, you're engaged. It gives you that sense of purpose. You're, we spend so much time at work, and you mentioned a few things. So you mentioned self-efficacy. That's one of the things. So actually, I don't know if you could see this. I call my book the 7E solution to burnout.
Okay.
A little bit.
There we go. Yeah. 7E solution to burnout.
Yeah. And so the 7 E's stand for these different things. So engagement is one. Self-efficacy, the efficacy part is really about your belief in your ability to do your work. And a lot of times I see people that are fully capable, but they have imposter syndrome. So they're dealing with so much mental drama that it's hard for them to do their work well, even though they can do it. So yes, so I think definitely self-efficacy is important. We want to see engagement where you aren't overly engaged, but you're also not under-engaged. And you talked about challenges. That's what we see with the under-engaged, is the people that are bored because they don't have enough challenging work. And they're like, yeah, I can do this in my sleep. We want to be able to tap into what are their strengths and how can we get them to do something more. And maybe those tasks that are easy for them, give it to somebody else. Let them do something that's harder or whatever, right? Yeah. So really fine-tuning based on your talent pool, who can do what and what their strengths are, so that everybody is, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. You've got to figure out all the pieces and what's going to help the company gel and get to a thriving workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. So then managers need training on paying attention to these things and having the one-on-one conversations to ask about, how are you feeling? Is this a good challenge for you or not? Are you overwhelmed or underwhelmed? And all of that. And
as a matter of fact, yeah. So one of the other E's, actually the first E in the book, is about emotional intelligence. And one of the things that I hear over and over again is that it's not just that employees are stressed out and burned out, but managers are so stressed out and they don't know how to coach their people.
Right.
So one of the biggest things that they need is managerial training on A, how to be a manager, B, how to manage your own stress, and C, how to then take that knowledge and those skills that you're learning for yourself and apply it, so that when somebody else is coming to you from your team and they're like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed, or maybe they're not even saying it, but you're seeing the signs because you've had the training. Now you're like, okay, I can pull this person aside and I can say, look, I can see that you're overwhelmed. Let's have a talk. Let's, or maybe they can do their own internal training on, this is how we manage stress. This, these are the things that you should be looking out for. This is what we're concerned when we're saying X, Y, and Z, having some policies in place. So it has to become part of the conversation and part of the culture.
Yeah, it does. And you said something earlier that we're also getting more comments. We've got, hang on, before I agree, life is about choices, the people you choose to hang out with. That's a fair point. If you hang out with a bunch of stress balls, then that's not going to be good for you. Like the pool you choose to stand in. Yes. So thank you for sharing that. Let's see. Harry says he has an ebook service that helps his stress. So thank you, Harry, for that. You'll have to put the link there in the chat. Vulnerability. I wanted to talk about that. I had been talking about that for a while, related to like harassment prevention, for example, which is kind of my world, right? Where if people are being harassed is very vulnerable. And if you want people to tell you about it as an employer, you've got to make room for vulnerability. And if you want it to solve, you have to make room for vulnerability, so that I could say, hey, Sharon, yesterday you made a dirty joke. It bugged me. You could say, I'm sorry. I won't do that again. So there's this, I think the fact that we are not making room for vulnerability creates a lot of problems, and stress is one of them, because we do need to be able to say, I'm so burned out. I have to go home. It's 10:29, but I can't. I need some free time. I need to reset. And it's just that is so not okay in our world. I feel like I don't know is there research around vulnerability at work at all? I don't even know if there is.
Yeah, what you're talking about is this concept of psychological safety,
right?
And that's part of every company's culture. Like, are you creating a culture where it's safe for people to come forward and be vulnerable and share? And how do we know if it's safe is by the response that we get, right? So if there's an expectation that, listen, I don't care how you feel, but you gotta finish this. I care about the product, I care about the deadline, and I don't really care about you. That is a very toxic environment,
right?
And obviously, those are the companies where they're going to see the highest rates of burnout and the highest rates of turnover. And I think the issue for those companies is that what it's doing is you're focusing, this is a big mistake, you're focusing on short-term gains and you're overlooking the long-term cost, because it's not a sustainable model. And if you look at how much it costs to get people, like if you've got high turnover, to get those people you've replaced, now it's time away from work, right? So there's lost productivity as you're searching for candidates. You got to interview those people, and now you've got to retrain them. And so there's a big gap now where productivity is at a standstill, and all of that excess stuff that needs to get done is falling on the people that you have that are already in place, which means that they're overburdened. They're going to then become burned out, and it just doesn't work. So we have to really take a step back and adopt a culture of sustainability, which means that we have policies in place that emphasize well-being for our employees, that show that we care, and that one of the ways that we do that is through psychological safety.
Yes. Yes. And the ones that don't have psychological safety are the clients that we help, because they come to us and say it's toxic and everybody's leaving. What do we do? Elle says, where can we get your book?
So yeah, it is available on my website. So if you go to drsharongrossman.com/book, I will actually autograph it and mail it out to you.
There you go. That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you very much. Well, we are out of time, and you have no idea how much therapy you just provided me. So personally, thank you. And I think everybody else agreed. Everybody's got some great comments about this conversation. So thank you, Sharon, so much for being here. And this was a really great conversation. And hopefully we'll run into each other in a green room somewhere at a conference, since we're both love the stress of speaking.
Absolutely. And I'm always happy to come back and talk some more with you about, performance and all the things in the workplace. So
we'll have to do that. We'll do that. I'll get Jenny to reach out. Hi, Jenny. Okay. Thank you. Bye, everyone.